Sir Chadwick, there is talk amongst the men that you may not win this wordle. Perhaps you might try, I don't know, putting in different letters than the ones you've already used. For example, you use W twice after already knowing it's not in the word.
The message.
Message has 7 letters. And our episode begins with symbolism. I think, maybe... Actually, I'm not really sure.
What are you talking about, Chad?
Well, it's just that there's this Valyrian soldier who's being crucified and he's begging for salvation from a man named Daemon who's flying a demon. I think it's like an inverted Jesus. No, totally. It's an inverted Jesus. He's criticizing the crab feeder for being the son of a whore with a bastard father. It's like the opposite of Jesus.
Wait a minute, are you saying that the soldier is the inverted Jesus because he's being crucified? Or is it the crab feeder because he's the son of a whore with a bastard father? Or is it Daemon because he's being called to save everyone while being a demon?
I mean, Brandon, in a way, aren't we all inverted Jesuses?
No. No, we're not. Except, yeah, maybe me.
Oh yeah, and everyone is being eaten by crabs, which are like biblically unclean animals, and it transitions to a roasted pig, another unclean animal, so you know, symbolism.
But those are unclean animals in the Old Testament, and Jesus is in the New Testament.
Those crabs aren't symbolic of the Bible, they represent me, Bartimo Celtigar, the Crab Prince. So, am I the only one having trouble understanding this war?
What do you mean?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that fire arrows are really, really stupid. I mean, I understand that visually we need something for the viewers to look at, but logically there's no reason that archers would be lighting their arrows on fire. Why would an archer want to distract himself from aiming with a big flaming arrow? Not to mention altering the trajectory with whatever burning mass is stuck to it. Honestly, what's the advantage? In fact, considering that Daemon is likely night-blinded by all the fire, regular arrows that he can't see coming in are going to be way more effective. Fire arrows are now this ridiculous fantasy trope, and they just need to stop. Stop with the fire arrows, they're dumb. But besides this issue, it seems like the basic problem is that Daemon's dragons are neutered because everyone goes into the caves, and then Daemon can't shoot into the lower caves as archers will attack from the top. So why doesn't he just start at the top and kill the archers?
Because they will just run into the caves.
But isn't he then now safe and he can shoot into those upper caves? Also, don't they have 2 dragons? Can't one dragon go to the upper caves and one on the lower? I mean, it just seems like his battle tactics are insanely bad. He has a flying dragon, but he keeps walking around with it on the ground, allowing everyone to shoot at him.
Look, Sweet Robin, dragons would easily win any war. So narratively, they had to be nerfed. The Dornish Wars don't make any sense either, and George put those in the books. A bunch of pirates with bows are not going to hold out against 2 dragons for more than 3 years. Come on, it's ridiculous. Daemon and Laenor could just patrol the island from the air, keeping Kragus in his caves until he ran out of food. There's absolutely no reason they should be losing. But then we wouldn't have a story.
And then we get to King's Landing, where we have justice for roast pig. You know, people say Twitter activism is pointless slacktivism and more posturing than actual real-world change, but here we are. We called for roast pig, and we did it. We got roast pig. Justice for roast pig. Justice for roast pig. Comet as a Vulcan. Definitely not a coincidence. Anyway, Viserys is with his son Aegon, and everyone tells him that Aegon has his hair.
Oh, Aegon has a bad wig?
And everyone says he also has his eyes.
Oh, so his eyes are not purple too.
Oh, and I'd just like to point out to everyone that Alicent is rubbing her belly, which lets us know that she's pregnant. Next we find out that Otto, besides being a bitch, is his brother's bitch. And then Tywin Lannister comes in to tell Viserys that Daemon is losing his war, which really, really makes Viserys angry.
Yeah, in general the dude looks like crap, which I don't really get. Last episode his wife died because of him. He was having a tough time with Rhaenyra, and his brother had amassed an army on Dragonstone. All things considered, he was handling it pretty well. Now his brother is losing some minor conflict in the Stepstones, and again, he's having trouble with Rhaenyra, and he's fucking falling apart. His life is clearly much, much better, but he acts like it's considerably worse.
I guess the stress of the job is getting to him?
Is ignoring a war in the Stepstones and ignoring marriage proposals really that stressful? Viserys has been king for like 15 years at this point. You'd think he'd be able to handle the job a little better.
Maybe he really misses his fingers. Anyway, next Alicent tries to make peace with Rhaenyra, which isn't going to happen. She fucked Rhaenyra's dad and is birthing usurpers. This bed's been shat. Oh, and I'd just like to point out to everyone that Alicent is rubbing her belly, which lets us know that she's pregnant. Anyway, the pointless peacemaking continues, and Rhaenyra mentions that she doesn't like killing boar as it sounds like human being killed, which is a callback to this roast pig and a foreshadowing of this roast pig, which are both paralleled to these roast pigs. Oh, and I'd just like to point out to everyone that Alicent is rubbing her belly, which lets us know that she's pregnant.
Anyway, they arrive at the Kingswood, and Hightower brazenly commits treason and calls Aegon the second of his name.
I'm just so tired of all these Star Wars.
Not only does Viserys have a dead brother named Aegon, he has an uncle named Aegon and a great uncle named Aegon. Saying Aegon second of his name is implying he's going to be king. It's straight up treason. He roasts the Lord of Casterly Rock for this, and they're talking in private. I have no idea how Hightower gets away with this shit.
Next, Rhaenyra passes by some guy that Alicent would consider Dornish, and then we meet the faker Larry Strong.
Faker!
You gotta give him props for the dedication, though. Anyway, Rhaenyra chats with some ladies who simultaneously believed the Seven Kingdoms should go to war, but yet are already at war. And then a late 20th century pug eats off a plate.
Huh, who knew that Chad was an expert in pugs?
I learned quite a lot in the dognet. Rhaenyra is then chatted up by Lord Jason Lannister, who wants to marry her and build a dragon pit for his queen, which pisses off Rhaenyra, so she yells at her dad before riding off.
Yeah, I don't really understand why there's an argument over this. Political marriages chosen by the parents are definitely the norm for highborn, both men and women. Viserys' second marriage is the exception, but he was an adult king at the time. The best example of a young person choosing their mate is actually Rhaenys choosing Corlys. But of course, nobody brings up this obvious example. I mean, I suppose we can simply write this off as Rhaenyra being a teenager and feeling like she's not in control. But later in the episode, she specifically associates being married off to not being heir, which I just don't get when Jason Lannister specifically called her his future queen. There are two very distinct things that Rhaenyra is angry about. One, there's a possibility of her being passed over as heir. And two, there's being forced into a marriage that she doesn't want. And they are completely unrelated. Heirs can be forced into marriages that they don't want, and people can be given the choice to marry and not be heir. I just don't understand how this episode is conflating these two completely unrelated concepts. And it's not just Rhaenyra, because later Jason Lannister also confuses them.
Anyway, Sucker Flail Crispin then follows Rhaenyra, and they joke a bit about killing Jason Lannister. Except, yeah, it's not really a joke. It's one of those jokes, not a joke. Like when a friend jokes that you should hook up.
Wait, I shouldn't be doing that?
The two talk a bit about Crispin's past, and Rhaenyra wonders if it might be better if she were common-born.
Spoken like someone who's never had cholera.
Anyway, a bunch of people gather around, and then more people gather around, and then more people gather around. They all watch Viserys smell some shit, and then get fed some shit. And then Jason Lannister approaches Viserys about marrying Rhaenyra, and he himself seems to forget that he previously called her a future queen.
Yeah, I'm as baffled as Viserys is in this scene. Jason talks about marriage as compensation for Rhaenyra losing her station. We again have the conflation of two things that are completely unrelated. It makes Rhaenyra look not so nuts, as Jason Lannister did believe the two went together, even though that's not what he said in the previous scene.
Targaryens can read minds, confirmed.
Viserys rightfully doesn't understand what the fuck Jason Lannister is talking about. And so Jason says that he assumed that Aegon was going to be named heir. But even if that were true, I don't see how he's responsible for compensation. The underlying conflict of this whole episode is just weird.
Viserys then gets all pissy that Jason assumed that Aegon was going to be heir, which makes me wonder how the hell Hightower got away with it. Oh right, the plot needed that one to make Rhaenyra upset. After this, Otto comes in and asks Viserys what he thinks about Jason Lannister possibly marrying Rhaenyra, to which Viserys says he doesn't want to command Rhaenyra to marry anyone. He wants for her to be happy, and then proving he's the worst listener on the planet, Otto then suggests that perhaps Rhaenyra should marry Aegon.
Oh, and I'd just like to point out to everyone that Alicent is rubbing her belly, which lets us know that she's pregnant.
This is followed by Viserys lamenting that he's unable to control his 17-year-old daughter.
17? What? She was 15 last episode. It's been like 3.25 years. 6 months to the wedding, 9 months of pregnancy, 2-year celebration of birth. There's no way Rhaenyra's 17. Man, Viserys is an asshole. He doesn't even know his own daughter's age. No wonder Rhaenyra's pissed at him all the time.
Lionel Strong then gives advice to marry Rhaenyra to Laenor Velaryon, a proposal that is so frigging obvious that it makes Viserys look like an absolute moron for never considering it. I mean, look at Viserys' face. Oh my gosh, what an idea!
Of course, even Lionel forgets that Laenor has a fucking dragon. My god, how are people forgetting this? Did the Stepstones nerf dragons so much that everyone doesn't remember them? Remember, there are 4 dragon riders in the world at this point. Or maybe 5 if Laena has claimed Vhagar. The Velaryons have 2, maybe 3. And they are allied with Daemon at this point. That's 3, maybe 4 dragons against Rhaenyra. It's fucking insane that this is not issue number 1 for the throne. How is Lionel not bringing this up? And how is Viserys acting like the idea to marry Rhaenyra to Laenor is revolutionary? He just asked Jason Lannister how many dragons he would bring him. If dragons were your criteria for marriage, then there's literally one single man in the world that fits the bill. Laenor Velaryon.
Then Rhaenyra continues to wonder if people will accept her as queen, and then she kills a boar.
Dude, symbolism.
And I think they threw in a scene from Brienne, A Feast for Crows.
Wait a minute. I thought Rhaenyra believed that Viserys was replacing her. I mean, that's why she's angry, right? Like, that's why she's sad in the beginning, and why she yells at her dad in the middle, and why she yells at her dad at the end. I mean, it's the whole reason they're in the forest, isn't it? How can she be wondering about whether people will accept her as queen when she's about to be passed over? And how can Kristen Cole say that they won't have a choice? This scene makes no sense in the context of the episode.
Yeah, this episode was definitely reworked.
And then we get this god-awful drunk Viserys scene. Oh god, I really thought the worst moment of House of the Dragon was the joust, or perhaps the butt farting into the camera. But no, it's this. It's drunk Viserys. In this scene, Viserys weirdly says that he named Rhaenyra heir to protect the realm from Daemon. It's as if the entire heir for a day incident and him being insulted afterwards didn't happen. And then he goes on to say that he stopped believing in prophecy despite having told Rhaenyra how important prophecy was and her place in it. It's as if the writers didn't watch the pilot. But what takes the cake, what really fucking takes the cake, is him saying, "I never imagined I'd remarry." Really? Never imagined. It never crossed your mind. Keep in mind, even happily married people think about what would happen if their partner died. This asshole believes in a prophetic dream that he will have a son, and then his wife dies in childbirth, which is incredibly common, and it never fucking crosses his mind that maybe he would have a second wife and some more kids. Oh my god, what an idiot. I mean, I get that Targaryens are nuts, but honestly, Viserys has to be the most bonkers of them all. Seriously, take any of the crazy ones. Aerion Brightflame, the Mad King Aerys, Viserys III. Imagine them in the same situation. Do you think any of them would claim, "I never imagined remarrying"? What an absolute fucking dolt. He is so stupid and incompetent that I have lost all sympathy for him. The Dance of the Dragons and all of the people that died, 100% his fault. I'm not blaming anyone else for it. Not the Maesters, not Otto Hightower, not Kristen Cole, not Rhaenyra or Aegon. It's this idiot's fault. By himself. I'm convinced that even if everyone in the kingdom were pacifists and dragons didn't even exist, that somehow this goober would figure out a way to have everyone burn.
Anyway, next the crew finds this large stag, and it's not white, but they have Viserys slaughtered anyway, and I think, they could have done a better job keeping it still. It's still lunging around, and they're using horses that aren't really anchored. One lunge and Viserys could get hurt.
No, those guys are awesome. Let the stag kill Viserys. Just let that guy die. Honestly, everyone would be better off.
Well, the stag disappoints Brandon, but Rhaenyra finds the real white stag, and she's still looking like a supermodel covered in blood. And she must know how good she looks because she just struts through camp. And then in the next scene, Otto tells Alicent to try to convince Viserys to switch his heir.
Oh, and I'd just like to point out to everyone that Alicent is rubbing her belly, which lets us know that she's pregnant.
So Alicent approaches Viserys, but rather than talking about heirs, the conversation turns to Daemon and the Stepstones. And Alicent is actually the real source of everything changing. Viserys doesn't want to send aid to Daemon, but it's Alicent who asks what's best for the realm.
It's insane that a teenage girl has to remind Viserys of this.
We then get to a final discussion between Rhaenyra and Viserys, and we find out that the entire episode was a big misunderstanding. Rhaenyra thought that being married off meant she was no longer heir. For some reason, as did Jason Lannister. But Viserys insists that no, she's still heir, because those two issues are completely unrelated. And as a bonus, Viserys says that Rhaenyra can marry whoever she wants.
Yeah, this really means that Viserys had no reason to be acting insane for most of the episode. He starts out believing that Rhaenyra is heir, so much so that Otto himself thinks that it's going to be difficult to change his mind. Then he gets angry at Jason Lannister in the middle of the episode for suggesting that Rhaenyra is not heir. And then he tells Rhaenyra at the end that she's still heir. Now yes, Viserys does say he wavers and it seems to be around the fire, perhaps influenced by the White Stag scheme, but that scheme is introduced well into the episode, at the 17-minute mark, and it's resolved fairly early, at the 35-minute mark. All the other scenes where Viserys is acting crazy are really just about Rhaenyra's proposals and Daemon and the Stepstones.
And finally, we get to those Stepstones and perhaps the most ridiculous war ever put to screen. Now granted, no medieval war with dragons is ever going to make sense. The plot demands that the dragon riders be losing, so that needs to happen somehow. I think it would have been more logical for the crab feeders' forces to be spread out, hidden by trees and caves, and be constantly moving. But I also understand that that would make it difficult to have one big decisive victory. That said, I still think it's a bit much to have the crab feeder using trebuchets against ships when he needs to retreat to caves.
And why, when everyone besides the audience knows that there are two dragons, would anyone come out of their cave?
And why wouldn't you just shoot Daemon from afar? These guys crucify people on beaches and feed them to crabs. Are they really ones for diplomacy?
And why do they come at Daemon one at a time at first, like a bad kung fu movie?
And isn't there just a little too much luck?
And a little too much plot armor?
And why did they send the entire army out to kill Daemon? He's a man, not a god.
And why did they stop and gather in a circle around him?
And where and when did these guys land?
And why wasn't Laenor doing this, taking out the archers, day one of the fucking war?
And why would you have Daemon kill the crab feeder off screen? Why on earth would you ever want to rob the viewer of that fight?
I guess they did it because the fans' reaction to the Blackfish being killed went over so well.
Chadwick, I bear a message from Chad Summerchild, the Queen in the North.
Chadwick, I have provided the solution to your wordle. Though time and circumstance has seen us estranged, know that it is not my desire to see you fail in your cause. It is instead my hope that this solution will give you the ability to be victorious in your daily wordle.
So what's your next guess? Brie Larson.